where the whiskey was made and then sliding it out. Guaranteed to be less than a day old, and off to the cars it went. And that's part of the moonshine legacy here in Tennessee, all through the Appalachian Mountain region. So, what I plan to do, I've got about a 15-minute talk here, tell you something about the history of all of this. Excuse me. I need my whistle there. Okay. George Washington was one of America's first large-scale distillers. His ventures into the endeavor began with the following letter written to James Anderson, Mount Vernon plantation manager. Quote, "Distillery is a business I am entirely unacquainted with, but from your knowledge of it and from the confidence you have in the profit to be derived from its establishment, I am disposed to enter upon one." George Washington, June 1797. After leaving office as our first president, Washington returned to Mount Vernon and its 2,250 square feet of distillery, housing 5 stills, making it among the largest whiskey distillers in early America. During 1799, Washington produced 11,000 gallons of whiskey, worth about $7,500, equivalent to several $100,000 today. With more than 360 slaves, some 220 work in the fields, Washington, as a businessman, managed his plantation to significant profitability, and he paid his taxes. As president, he and his first cabinet member, Alexander Hamilton, who was Secretary of the Treasury and founder of the Bank of New York, had imposed among our nation's first laws a tax that levied 6 to 18 pence on each gallon of spirits. As a private citizen, Washington paid as much as $1,980, that's 100 pence to the Spanish dollar, about 26% of the sale of his whiskey. At the time, there was no American currency. The Spanish dollar, long in circulation, had become the recognized standard. 1 ounce of silver, some with the numeral 8 minted on one surface, were pieces of 8. We've all heard about that. That were divided into $half-dollar or 4 bits, $quarter-dollar or 2 bits, or $8, 12.5 cents, or 1 bit. Hard currency was in short supply, so much of commerce was barter, with a jug of whiskey, another recognized standard of trade that got better with time. Taxes of all forms, especially on distilled spirits, have remained contentious throughout American history. Initially, most taxes were on industries and commerce, but during the Civil War, American President Abraham Lincoln had to raise finances for the Union cause and levied a temporary personal income tax on citizens of 1%. That tax expired after the conflict, and the nation's economy steadily grew to become the greatest among nations. Because of the continual flow of wealth associated with alcohol, greed among government officials who collected under-the-table payoffs gave the Ulysses S. Grant administration a black eye, and several anti-alcohol factions grew. The Women's Holy War resulted with the Anti-Saloon League gaining political strength that, when combined with the Prohibition Party, was able to change politics. Leaders of the Prohibition Party developed the routine of offering state representatives up for re-election. Their party's vote if the representative signed anti-alcohol legislation. The Prohibition Party had grown sufficiently to be a swing vote that secured elections, the first pack of significant effect. During 1907, the Georgia legislature voted the state dry without a single referendum to the people. Mississippi and Tennessee followed it during 1908, and as states went dry, a crisis was created in Washington. By 1900, the U.S. Treasury counted more than 50% of its income from excise taxes on alcohol. With states going dry, this revenue stream was gradually drying up, and the U.S. Congress quietly enacted the 16th Amendment that gave the federal government authority to levy income taxes on citizens. Although the U.S. was not involved in World War I at the time, the 16th Amendment was enacted with the persuasive pitch that funds were needed to fight the Kaiser. Ratification of the amendment was achieved that gave unlimited authority to the government to impose income taxes in perpetuity, not wartime temporary, as was Lincoln's tax. Fueled partly by the rapid emergence of the automobile after 1900, the individual freedom of movement that motor vehicles provided, the U.S. economy steadily grew. More millionaires were produced by the automobile industry and mechanized industrialization, and all the gold found throughout U.S. history. From 1909 until 1927, Henry Ford's Model T sold at continually lowered prices that made cars available to almost everyone, and spawned a time of youthful exuberance that brought a national craze for the automobile, for travel, and for racing that was interrupted only by the First World War. After that conflict, U.S. industry boomed into the roaring 20s of good times, loosened by whiskey that the Women's Holy War and the Anti-Saloon League attacked with every means available. Using similar tactics on the federal level, the Prohibition Party grew into such influence that Congress enacted the 19th Amendment, making the entire country dry. Ratified during 1919, and during 1920, the sale of any consumable product containing more than 0.005% alcohol was illegal, although stocks on hand could be served until they were exhausted. So, keeping empty bottles with labels intact for refill were continual stocks on hand that tended not to go dry. With the Prohibition movement, women took politics into their homes and proved themselves to be a powerful political movement that changed the Constitution and life in America. As a result, the long-debated women's suffrage, that is, the right to vote, came to another act of Congress, the 20th Amendment. Immediately following the 19th, gave women the right to vote, a direct product of the Prohibition movement. The 19th Amendment had sent alcohol from a multifaceted tax-paying enterprise of a huge industry underground. Trafficking of moonshine whiskey with illegal stills set up anywhere anyone wanted to erect them grew into an enterprise whose wealth was controlled largely by criminals who suddenly had huge quantities of cash. The stock market crash in 1929 sent the nation into the Great Depression without collection of alcohol excise taxes, so law enforcement, such as an army of revenuers, had to be funded out of the general treasury. Meanwhile, the moonshine business made small-time crooks into well-financed crooks who were flush with money. What to do with it initiated organized crime as we know it. Well, where did the money come from? Moonshiners made their whiskey to double their cost, selling each gallon for about $5 or $6. Bootleggers bought the whiskey and doubled their money by transporting it to markets, largely in the cities, where glitzy speakeasy clubs had become the social focus of the roaring 20s. That youth movement. Club owners bought moonshine whiskey for about $12 a gallon and sold it by the shot, typically 1 ounce for $1. Consequently, each gallon of whiskey returned $128 in cash. More if cut by water. Criminal elements were quick to seize the opportunity provided by the 19th Amendment and accumulated large quantities of cash, so much so that Bugsy Siegel, realizing that that gambling was legal in Nevada, spent a suitcase full of cash building the Flamingo that established Las Vegas as the glamour capital of the world. Well, what happened to women's holy war? Saloons attracted men away from home life. Easy clubs attracted both men and women who enjoyed classy entertainment and booze. The holy war simply evaporated because women wanted to do what their men were doing and going out of the town to glitzy settings of glamour that served alcohol was okay. Having endured more than a decade of no alcohol excise tax, the 19th Amendment was overturned with the 21st Amendment. And by the early 1930s, now with income tax law in place and from the 16th Amendment, revenue from alcohol vastly increased federal income just in time to fund World War II. After that conflict, the post-war baby boom brought with it a booming economy that funded a new youth movement, the car culture of fast cars, hot rods, and racing. In the poor South, cash was hard to come by, and a young hot shoe driver could earn $40 for a single nighttime haul of a few hours hauling moonshine whiskey, more than could be earned in a week of work if a job could be found. Cash went into ever faster and stronger cars that could haul 700 to 1,000 pounds of whiskey and still outrun the law, making highly skilled drivers and builders, to note Virginia Johnson of North Carolina and Curtis Turner of Virginia. Piedmont, North Carolina dirt tracks became venues of early stock car racing, and the first 5 tracks were built using moonshine money. Thus, lumbered moonshine money fed widespread interest in racing that became a fixture of our Southern lifestyle. As of 1950, the federal excise tax on a proof gallon of whiskey, that is 50% alcohol, 50% water, was $10.50. That was soon increased to $13.50 a gallon. Selling a gallon for $5 or $6, moonshiners could not afford these taxes and remained underground, perpetuating the alcohol economy in the South, especially through the Appalachian Mountain region. Robert Mitchum's 1958 film, Thunder Road, portrays the time rather accurately and has become a time-honored telling of moonshine life. In addition to federal taxes, by 2007, the average state tax on a proof gallon of alcohol was $3.97. And the alcohol industry contributed $382 billion to U.S. economic activity. By then, federal, state, and local taxes comprised over 55% of the retail price of legally marketed spirits. Although states vary in alcohol tax assessment, $440 or $4.40 a gallon in Tennessee versus $1.92 a gallon in Kentucky. Such taxes reflect the relative sizes of their spirits industries. Small in Tennessee, with only one major distillery, Jack Daniels, and large in Kentucky, with many major distilleries known worldwide for bourbon whiskey. Now that states have loosened their alcohol legislation to gather more taxes, many craft distilleries have emerged, and moonshine is readily available as bonded whiskey and common in the modern lexicon. Today, for example, Hardee's Restaurants offers moonshine burgers flavored with Junior Johnson's Midnight Moon White Lightning that is now legally distilled. The same that was once illegal to produce that sent him to federal prison during 1957 for 11 months and 3 days. So, tracing the history of whiskey in America, simply follow the money. Any questions or comments?
Best thing Ronald Reagan ever did was pardon Junior Johnson.
Any questions, comments? Yes.
So, like, if I wanted to make moonshine just for myself to drink, is that legal?
No.
Absolutely.
There are 5 federal charges that you can be charged against. If you have an unregistered still, if you use an unregistered still, if you collect together illegal spirits, and now there are some others I can't think of offhand, but there are 5 federal statutes against that. However, you can get a license from the state of Tennessee, and as long as you meet the requirements, you can open your distillery as the Thunder Road Distillery did down here at exit 407. Pardon? Oh, sure. You gotta pay. That's what it's all about.
You can do wine and beer, but only a small amount, 5 gallons or something like that.
And no distilled spirit is legal
Right.
without a federal license. Beer, whiskey, wine, all of that can be made, and there are lots of craft industries out there, as we all know. Yes.
So moonshine and the taxing of moonshine was part of our economy.
It was a very big part of our economy early on because there was no U.S. currency. And the only currency that was in vogue at the time was the Spanish coinage, which has been around a long time. And typically the Spanish dollar, where we get our name for a dollar. And then the fact that it was divided produced our half dollar. And then divide that produced our quarter. And then we have dime, nickels, and pennies.
In the movie Thunder Road, they used Route 33, wasn't it, for the movie, or was that a real thing?
No, the movie was filmed entirely in the Asheville, North Carolina area.
Okay.
Although it is a Knoxville story, as the ballad you just heard. Warren, out of Harlan, shot the gap at Cumberland Gap, 33, 32 into Knoxville. The way that the routing was done at the time, of course, there was no Interstate 40. And so the main roads that came into Knoxville on the north side split off in what was called the truck route. And that's Paper Mill Road now. Or you could go into town and come out west on Kingston Pike and across Bearden Hill. But we're all old enough to remember how Paper Mill used to join Kingston Pike in a Y, yield sign. Now it's been reshaped and there's a stop sign, stoplight, and all kinds of things. So it's very, very different now. But the idea was that Paper Mill was the route that trucks could take to bypass having to go through Knoxville. That was the only two routes available at the time.
Was the historical crash that the song mentions near P.F. Chang's on Kingston Pike?
Up the hill. The reason I say that is in the book. By the way, I brought some copies of the book. They're author signed and reduced for Satoma. They're only $10 a piece. And if you would like to have your very own T-shirt, I brought a few of those. $10 a piece.
Oh, he wrote the book.
So the crash site. Now, if you remember the way Kingston Pike used to be, it was a two-lane. And in my book, there is a picture of it's the World Futon now, but it was a very classy motoring inn in the 50s. Now, know that the reason that we know it was a classy motoring inn is it advertises a bathroom in every room. That was the only establishment. Once you came out of Paper Mill, you started up Kingston Pike, two-lane. There was forest on both sides, and it made a gentle turn to the left as it went uphill. And on the right was the motel. Beyond that, there was nothing but woods. And if you look at the picture, you can see the vast hardwood forest behind it, where Interstate 40 is now, which cut all that off. As you went up Kingston Pike, you can still see today, if you look carefully, that the knoll was higher than it is now. It's been leveled down, and there's businesses along in there. An office depot on one side, the north side, and there's it's an Italian restaurant there.
Bravos?
Naples?
Olive
Garden.
Olive Garden, probably.
Olive Garden, that's it, yeah. So that's where the hill was, the Kingston Pike Hill, and behind it was a dip. And just at that hill, there was a driveway and went into W.G. Walker's farm. His house was completely covered, or the ground that the house sat on was completely covered by Interstate 40. That cut off all the main routes that left Kingston Pike going north because of the fill dirt that was moved in. So in reshaping subsequently Kingston Pike, which is 5 lanes now, from the 2 lanes, and you can see in the photo that the edge of Kingston Pike went right up to the driveway of the motel, was circulated in, had a lot more room than is there now. So it expanded both to the north and the south and put in the 5 lanes. But back then, when you crested the top of the hill, there was W.G. Walker's farm. There was a hedgerow fence and cedars, typical growth that we see today. And the feds had set up an operation that was called Thunder Road. That's where the name of the movie initially came from. Background for the movie was that Mitchum, to make that story short, because we don't have time for it, he proposed with a 4-page write-up, it really wasn't even a script, to do a movie, Thunder Road. And because of his personal cachet, he was an important male star in filming at that time. They said, okay. And he agreed to finance it himself, direct it himself, star in it himself. He hired some people, but most of it was done on the fly. There wasn't really a firm script. It was not like any other movie. So what he did, at the time, the Asheville area was well known for its filming industry. There have been lots and lots of movies done there. They agreed to accept the Thunder Road thing. And Mitchell essentially directed everything, hired local people, hired local cars to participate in the film, and produced a movie that's a rather good rendition of Southern life at the time. And the testimony to that is that when I was researching the book, United Artists told me that Thunder Road, now remember this is a black and white B movie, personally financed. It was a DRM production, D. Robert Mitchell production. The only movie he ever did by himself. Has never been out of release and has had more show dates than any other United Artists film. How in the world can a B summer movie do that? Well, because it tells a story of Southern life that's many people know.
Do you think we should have a historical marker at the crash site? Kind of like help our tourism and such?
Oh, as popular as this movie is, I'm amazed there's not a Thunder Road Cafe ever half block. I mean, so many people in our age group, you know, the gentleman back there, you know, he and I were reciting the Ballad of Thunder Road that we just heard, that we learned as kids. Where I grew up, over across these mountains over in North Carolina, close to the Virginia line. Out in the country, there wasn't any entertainment. TV wasn't nearly what it was it's today. You know, it signed off like at 10 o'clock at night and didn't come on until Howdy Doody at like 9 o'clock the next morning or something. The only entertainment was drive-in. And there was a drive-in that typically showed a double feature on Saturday night. And about every third Saturday night, the second of the double feature was either Thunder Road or Thunder in Carolina with Rory Calhoun. So we kids, anytime we go to the movies, we were likely to see Thunder Road. I probably saw that movie, I don't know, a dozen times maybe during that period of time. And I always thought it was a Hollywood movie until it moved up here. And I knew the words of the song had ever since I was a teenager. And I come across this place called Maynardville, Tennessee. Maynardville, that's a real place. And Kingston Pike, you know, you look on the map, there's no such thing as Kingston Pike. It's local connotation. Only in Tennessee and in Kentucky mostly do you see the word pike for a main route. So it's indigenous to this area. I'd never heard of a pike. It was always a highway or a road or something or other. That's just across the mountains in North Carolina. So I began thinking, Kingston Pike, and then Bearden Hill, just outside of Bearden, they made this fatal strike. And boy, Bearden, if you look at a map from that period of time, 1954, there is a little circle there with the name B-E-A-R-D-E-N. If you didn't know how it was pronounced, how would you pronounce it?
Bearden.
Bearden.
Yeah, Bearden. I mean, it would be obvious to anybody. But it was a local family, so it had a local pronunciation, so the person would have to know local history to get it right. Well, here's Mitchell in California. That he composes, that's his baritone voice, you heard it. That's the original recording, by the way. He must have known someone here to have gotten all the facts right, all the geography right, and the events correct. So in my research, what I was able to do through an eyewitness, John Fitzgerald, who grew up just down the road, his daddy owned a large acreage. He looked me up one day, and I was doing a signing somewhere, and he said, you know, I might know something about that Thunder Road thing. So we got to talking, and he told me his story that became the interview that's in the book. And he describes that the lay of the land back then was where West Town Mall is now, was a family farm. And there was a house there with fields all in the background. And across the road from it was Galleon Service Station. And then there was a road that went north. That's before Interstate 40 was built. And so it would be parallel to W.G. Walker's driveway. He said one day, he couldn't remember when it was, but he was out of school and it was a cool day, so he thought it was in the springtime, but he wasn't really sure about that. He rode his bicycle to meet his friends that lived in the house that's now the north parking lot of West Town Mall. As they would usually do, they're at Galleon Service Station and they could get an RC and moon pie or whatever would be the appropriate thing. And when he got there was a truck and there were guys with suits. Guys with suits out in the country. Says, something's going on. So he kind of hung around and he hung around and he would listen, he said, and he would try to pick up on whatever these guys were talking about. And he came across, one of them said something about Thunder Road. And he goes, oh, where's this Thunder Road? He was thinking, and it really got his attention because he knew all the geography around and never heard of Thunder Road. So he wanted to know where this place was. And the development was that they had, this was entirely a federal operation. There was no police, county, state, nothing. It was entirely federal. They had a truck loaded with firefighting equipment and personnel and a group of cars, and they were talking with each other by walkie-talkie, World War II vintage stuff, with other federal agents that must have been posted around the area. Yeah, he just passed here. Yeah, he just passed here. Their objective was to capture this notorious Kentucky moonshiner. Well, he came through the paper mill route. John, I should back up and say where the dip was. Remember the dip just past Bearden Hill? The feds set up a roadblock there. 2 cars nose to nose. Other cars parked in W.G. Walker's driveway. And there were cedars there, so they were all hidden. And then when you went through the top of the hill, went through the dip, up the other side, makes a right-hand turn, and this oddball left turn is still kind of oddball, even in 5 lanes. The reason it's oddball is that John Fitzgerald's daddy would not lease to the state the corner of his property to make that road straight. So they had to go around it, and that's why that corner is there. And it was known as Dead Man's Curve, even when he was young, because people had been killed there. It was very unusual the way it was shaped. So he rode his bicycle to Gallion's, and here's all of these feds, or he didn't know they were feds, but men in suits. So he just kind of tags along, and they got a call. He's on his way. So they hustled up, went to their first roadblock, which was the road just east of West Town. That is Morrell Road. It used to be, it followed along the contour of the land. It used to be way low and came up at a sharp angle into Kingston Pike. That was 2 lanes then. Subsequently, it's been filled in and raised and all that. But back then, it was very difficult. Morrell was very difficult to get into Kingston Pike. You had to basically get out into traffic to see. And they set up their cars there, used a truck, parked on the side, John told me, with guys in coveralls with the hood up, like they were working on the truck. And he said he rode his bicycle to the first or the second roadblock area, which would be where down in Morrell Road. And he was thinking, he said he got to thinking that, if things happened earlier on, I might miss it. So he got on his bike and he rode down further, approximately where Chili's is now. Chili's in that restaurant in that U-shaped complex on the south side of Kingston Pike. Well, his daddy owned that. That's the land that had the alcohol turned to it. So he says that he could hear this powerful car coming up from Paper Mill up Kingston Pike. And apparently at a high rate of speed, crested the hill and saw the first roadblock. Couldn't stop, of course. So he rockets to the right, up a bank, John described, taking down little cedars and briars and whatever else was there. Went around the first roadblock, back onto Kingston Pike, behind the first roadblock, not knowing that there was a second roadblock. And there's no exit between those 2 roadblocks. Morrell is the next road. On the north side was the interconnect station between LCUV and KUV electrical exchanges. And there was an access road to that exchange complex, small, he said, on the north side. The driver of the car went around the first roadblock, got back on Kingston Pike, crested the hill, made that right-hand turn, was going too fast, or his car was damaged, or both, couldn't make the left-hand turn, and launched himself at that dead man's curve. There was a large gully, a huge wash over a long period of time, and gradually washed out the dirt. One of the things that Kingston Pike, that Interstate 40 did was to fill all that in. And where Chili's is now, it's all filled in. It was an enormous gully at that time. So, in the song that you heard, he left the road at 90, that's all there is to tell. Devil got the moonshine and the driver that day. Right? That's the way the story goes. John said he got there, the car hit so hard that it threw up a tremendous cloud of red clay dust. Car hit so hard that it bent the frames and the back wheels were off the ground, and it was sitting there with the frame bent. The trunk lid had flown open and moonshine had flown into the utility station there and caught on fire.
Oh.
And the federal people were there with firefighting equipment, and they were putting out the fire. And John said he remembered seeing the young man. Said he was trim, probably in his mid-20s, that the impact of the car had thrown him out, either through the windshield or somewhere or another, and he was dead. John said he remembered seeing him lying on the ground. But one thing that stood out in his mind, and all of us boys will remember this from the 50s, he had on a short sleeve shirt and had rolled up 2 laps. Yeah, how many people have done that? Remember that? Style of the 50s was rolling up a short sleeve.
You know, they played that car chase at Jollywood's Motion Master Theater, and I saw it for the first time like 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing car chase, I gotta say.
Yeah. Yeah, I was there at the debut. We helped to launch Dolly's enterprise. And unfortunately, there was such a whiplash from, might I say, Bible thumpers of the area that she closed that ride down.
Oh.
I loved it.
Everybody that rode that
I
ride
loved it.
and it was a tremendous adventure. But she received so much negative publicity that decided that since it's a family theme park, that's.
Is there somewhere we can go and watch the original movie, like online somewhere?
Oh, it's still available. You can buy it. Yeah, it's on DVD. Just look it up on Amazon.
My wife was a school teacher back in the 70s. They were rounding up these kids that had never been to school and